Hello and welcome to section 1.5. This is in part B of module 1, and we're looking at the digital financial services ecosystem. So a system within a system. And so in the study guide, it's listed as the key components step by step, but I'm actually coming about it a slightly different way, and I want to show you how they sit on top of each other as a type of framework. So the first thing is your bedrock, your foundation stones. Without good policies, laws, regulations to make sure that digital services, for example, are accessible, affordable, but also safe, you're protected in terms of privacy and ransomware items like that, we need a foundation stone set in place by governments. So that's the first item. From there, we have our infrastructure, our financial infrastructure, so our banking rules and regulations, as well as our technical, the computers and the systems talking to each other. Then what comes next? We've got the providers in the digital financial services system. So based on that, which of these do you think meet the requirement as providers? Banks, businesses, government agencies, non-profit groups. So we see here banks, non-banks, licensed financial institutions are our providers. And from there, we've got our users. So as I said in the study guide, it starts with the users, providers, infrastructure policy, but visualizing it this way shows you how each layer sits on top of its foundations. So our users, our consumers and businesses, not-for-profits, government agencies, they're all going to be part of this digital financial services ecosystem. Now, taking from the theoretical to the practical, Airwallex is an example of a company operating within this system. They provide a single platform for international business accounts. Now, if you've in the last 5 or 10 or 20 years had to do any international buying or selling, you have to obtain foreign exchange. You often have to have bank accounts in other countries. It's incredibly complicated and tiresome and lots of steps to follow and often delays and frustration. So simplifying these areas is incredibly valuable to businesses. Not only that, they have this single platform. The future integrations are becoming more powerful. They currently already integrate with your accounting software, which makes it quick and fast. You're not copying data from one system to another and reconciling. And then in the future, invoicing, quoting, expense management, because if you use your Airwallex card for payments, that should translate straight into what your employees are doing and spending that money on. Payroll and even a payment gateway for e-commerce. So we have our digital financial services, we have an ecosystem, but what's the goal? What is it trying to achieve? So the key always goes back to that infrastructure of the financial realm. And you have your providers of capital or money they want to invest on one side or lend. And on the other, you have the users, the borrowers who want that money. And we need intermediaries to bring those two together because they never normally have matching needs and it creates liquidity problems. So our overarching goal, the providers want to allocate savings. The users want access to the lowest cost funding. And if it works smoothly, we'll balance risk and liquidity and return, because problems arise when there is not a perfect match. That's why we have banks in the middle, for example. So if you're a lender and you've got 10,000 to lend, and then there's a borrower on the other side, but they want 350,000 to buy a house, you actually need to find 35 different lenders. Now, do they all want to lend for 35 years? Maybe 10 years, maybe 15. So it's very, very hard to get that to mesh together. And so peer-to-peer lending, for example, has a problem with liquidity and that perfect matching. But as we go down the digital realm, it gets easier and easier to piece these places together. So I've got a task for you. As you read through the goals of the DFS and making that ecosystem work, we see one of the key components or issues is financial inclusion, and that's broken down into a bunch of dot points. Now, I want you to stop for a minute. Don't just skim read those. I want you to see if you can work through this slide without opening the study guide and think about financial inclusion from each of these 6 areas. Describe what this section means, what potential obstacles might exist, and strategies to overcome it. So that way, firstly, it's good for your exam because you've really thought carefully about what financial inclusion is and how to get around it. But secondly, in your workplace, if you want to be looking at developing products, strategies, systems, and integrating this DFS into your work, then what are you going to do to make sure of financial inclusion? If you've thought about this, you'll be prepared to include this into your analysis. So complete that task. And it's a better way than just reading the study guide. It forces you to think, test to see if your memory is activated and you really know your content. So what we've got, an example. So we start with theory and now we look at an example. Financial inclusion. And interestingly, the technology developments here have happened in the lesser developed countries, often in Africa, Asia Pacific as an example, rather than in Western countries, because they didn't have an issue. They didn't need any innovation because they had banks and credit cards and everyone has a bank account. So mobile phone payments via text message became incredibly powerful over the last couple of decades. And not only that, with mobile phones, you get data about what the prices are in the city and overseas. So if you're selling coffee and you previously only knew the price that the person who came to your farm gate was willing to pay, you would often get exploited and get a very low price. But if you know that coffee is really popular at the moment and the market price is much higher, you can demand more money. So better data, more knowledge of the market gives you higher crop prices. The other benefit is when you only can trade with people you directly interact with, you've got cash constraints and you can't transact with people further away. But now you can message, you can buy and sell across the country. And you can also start developing other things. You're not just selling farm goods, but off-farm activities like handicrafts, things that you've made. So you can grow your income, grow your wealth, improve your welfare. But there's always issues and obstacles to face. And this happened, 6 years ago now, and it's been resolved. But if a phone company starts allowing for payments, does that make them a phone company or does it make them a bank? And how are they regulated? And then, of course, banks might not be too keen on the idea, so they try and squish it. So you will also face those regulatory legal obstacles unless you've resolved them. And so mobile money, for example, was outlawed for a while and called illegal. So these are the factors whenever you develop a new product or service, you have to think about not only the technical side, but the regulatory side as well. So I have another task for you. And in this case, it's taken from a figure in the study guide, but I want you to see if you can fill in the key components and how they flow. Because you can't just memorize, you can't just read and go, oh yeah, I think I get that. You actually have to deeply think about how this ecosystem interacts, how the pieces of the puzzle flow together so that your analysis and understanding keeps growing. So have a look at this. See if you just write out each of the headings and list the concepts of each key area and how they interrelate. So, and it comes back to that foundation stone pyramid we looked at earlier. The policies, laws, and regulations support this ecosystem. And on top of that, the infrastructure. So what do we mean by infrastructure? Well, we need payment systems. We need to be able to pay. And you think about how simple it is these days. You just tap and off you go. But in the old days, you had to take cash, or you could take several minutes to write a check. If you paid by credit card, you had to use one of those machines. It took a very long time. There was a lot of, if you wrote a check, people would write down your driver's license number to make sure it was valid. So that ties in with those identity systems. And we need the internet working. We need voice and data networks. So we need a lot of infrastructure if we're going to build this digital financial services ecosystem. And we also need our regulators, our governments, our policies, and even standard bodies to decide how the data will move, how it interacts, how will it cross borders, where will it be hosted, items like that. So we want to achieve digital liquidity. And if you think of liquidity as things moving smoothly versus friction, if we go back in time to like barter events, in the old days, you would have someone have products, they might have a cow and someone else might have chickens or some crops, and they want to trade. And it's very hard to work out the exact value of one cow versus how many chickens. So the power of turning that into cash helps give us liquidity. We can buy and sell, and you can receive money for your cow now and put that cash away and buy something in 3 months' time, rather than trading immediately. So digital liquidity allows us to buy and trade and sell and act much more smoothly with a lot less friction. So a closed loop system, like the Apple system, Apple Pay, you're within that system. So if you've got money in your Apple accounts, you can use it for Apple type products, but it doesn't allow you to just go to the supermarket and purchase in an immediate sense. So proprietary company-based systems are closed. On the other side, there's open loop systems. So we think of banks. So if you have a bank card, you can buy at the supermarket, then you can put petrol in your car, you can go to a retail outlet, you can withdraw cash from a machine or a bank. And you can go to the ANZ Bank or you can go to the Commonwealth Bank and it will work. Those systems are much more open. And we're trying to bring these loops together where, and an example is Amazon Pay. So Amazon Pay starts closed loop, but now all of a sudden, companies that aren't even in the Amazon network can accept cash via Amazon Pay, just like they could accept cash from ANZ Bank or another bank. So it's morphing towards that idea of a bank in place. So the more we have these open loops where you don't have to be tied to just Apple or just Amazon or just Google, whatever it might be, and it works anywhere, the more likely we'll get to liquidity quickly. So I mentioned earlier this idea of the barter system making it difficult. So as we move towards cash, you can buy and trade and sell and store value much more easily. In the same way, to have digital liquidity now, we need, first of all, the payments to be able to go into digital wallets. So each week or each month, people's payroll gets done. You might be involved in doing that. Cash gets put into someone's bank account. Now, this is the importance of financial inclusion. What if you don't have a bank account? Well, in the old days, you used to literally get an envelope filled with cash. Of course, that's tricky, time-consuming, risky. It could be stolen. And so it's great to do electronic transfers, but how do we get them into digital wallets? That will start the digital process, because without the money in your wallet, you've got nothing to spend. The second thing is, how easy is it to spend from your digital wallet? Because if you go to a merchant, if you go to a business and you want to buy stuff, will they accept it from your digital wallet? If you can't convert your cash in your digital wallet into a payment, it's not very liquid. There's a lot of friction there. So we need everyone accepting these payments. Now, go back 20 years and people used to take cash. And bigger businesses would accept credit cards. But as the technology gets quicker and more efficient, even very, very small businesses, you can just tap and you can just pay. So this interoperability is that open instead of closed network. So, if, is it Apple? Is it Google? Is it Android? Who cares? When you go to the supermarket, when you buy online, the more that they interrelate, the easier it'll be to turn your digital wallet money into expenditure. Now, we start off with payments and receiving payments. That's great. That's the starting point. But until we add savings, lending, and investing, we don't really have digital liquidity. So these are the key components. And who does this? Who drives this? Well, the government, the regulators, by setting up the systems and laws and rules to protect things. Then the next step up is the ICT infrastructure. We need to build infrastructure that allows wallets to work safely. Do you feel comfortable? What if it could get hacked or stolen? What if you lose the USB that it's sitting on, or the password? Do you lose all your cash? That terrifies people. So how do we create safe systems that people can use? Now, we also have to consider a bunch of risks, issues, and challenges. Firstly, and this comes back to that financial inclusion, the digital divide. If you can't get on the internet, you don't have that phone or that device or that mobile, you don't have the knowledge or the ability, then you are going to have problems. People are going to be excluded from this system. The second thing is user data is so valuable and it's really hard to comply with all those terms and conditions or read them. They're so long. And so your data can be sold even if there's a privacy policy and items like that. So we are exposed to greater and greater risk, including identity theft. But also, you sometimes hear about this when people have their cryptocurrency wallets hacked or stolen. There are some serious issues to be resolved here. The quality of work for people working in this ecosystem is sometimes available for exploitation. They're not always protected employees. They're often treated as contractors, not employees. They don't get leave entitlements. So the quality of work for employees is sometimes subpar. And one of the final issues is competition. In the normal world, the real world, the physical world, competition, you normally have a winner, someone who comes second, third, fourth, but you have a long tail of competitors. So if you think of the soft drink market, Coca-Cola has a major chunk. Pepsi has a slightly smaller chunk. Then there's Schweppes and there's other beverage companies. But there's space for many, many to compete. Now, when you go online, what tends to happen is only one or two, maybe three major competitors dominate the whole market. Think Google for search, or think Apple and Android for phones. These cloud services is going to be Amazon and Microsoft Azure. The scale required to make it work is so big that it really concentrates the market. And once one or two players own the market, it's very, very hard for someone else to crack in, which opens it up to exploitation and abuse when there's only a duopoly or an oligopoly. Now, to conclude Module 1 Part B, Section 1.6 is very brief, and we're now diving even deeper into the ecosystem, looking only at digital payments. So I've got another task for you, and this is where I want you to not just read the table, skim and do nothing. I want you to look at this table without looking at the study guide and see how many providers you can list, fill in the gaps. And also, if you come across a component you don't really know. So do you know what an e-wallet platform is? If not, do a bit of online reading. Do you know what a tablet POS provider is? So for point of sale, who are they? How's that helpful? Because then you can take that back to your own business where you work or for the clients you help out. They might not have set up these point of sale, these systems, these very quick opportunities. So go through this list and say, should our organization have these? Would it be helpful? How much do I need to know across these areas to properly be understanding the digital finance realm? So a quiz to take us towards the end of this. Which of the following, if you read through example 1.6, are components of Apple's digital payments ecosystem? Take a moment to have a look at that. And we will see that A, C, D, and E are all components that are listed. Now, ICT infrastructure will be necessary at some point, but it's not listed as a key component. It's probably a sub-component, I guess, of making it work. So I want you to go through example 1.6, and then there's this final reflection to bring you to the end. Do you think digital payments will play a role in your business that you work in or the client's businesses? So if you're in an accounting firm, do your clients need to think closely about digital payments? And could you help them explain what the products are, list the technology requirements, and help them implement it? That's the key part of doing the study guide. The knowledge of digital finance and how to implement it. And will they use it for B2C, which is business to consumer, or B2B, business to business, or even both? So take a moment to think about how your organization may do digital payments. I hope you found that tour of Part B useful. Once again, always try and tie it back to the objectives, especially Objective 2 in this case, where we're looking at complexity associated with practical implementation of these technologies and that finance ecosystem. Thank you.